Tonight, the kingdom is waiting. You wake to light on stone, not the diffuse and gentle light of a clouded morning, or the filtered green gold of a forest canopy. This is the first direct light of a clear dawn, entering through the tall eastern window of your chamber and laying itself across the floor in a precise rectangle whose dimensions you know by heart, because the window was cut to a specific proportion by the court's architects, and the light it admits behaves in a specific way at every hour of every season. And an enchanter who works with light learns its behaviors the way a craftsperson learns the grain of their material. Not approximately, but exactly. The rectangle on the floor this morning is the rectangle of a clear autumn dawn, its edges sharp, and its color the deep gold that means the air outside holds no cloud and no moisture. And this tells you before you have risen that the conditions for today's calibration work are correct. The chamber is small by the standards of some in the sun court, but it is oriented correctly, which matters more than size in a working enchanter's quarters. The eastern window for the dawn working, the northern window, shuttered now, for the particular quality of cool indirect light that certain preparations require in the afternoon hours. The stone of the walls is the pale limestone of the court's upper levels, its surface dressed smooth and kept clean, and in the first light of the morning it holds the warmth of the previous day in its surface, while the air above it is cool, a combination that produces a very slight movement in the room's atmosphere that the candle flames respond to, bending infinitesimally toward the warmer stone and then straightening as the differential resolves with the morning's advance. You dress in the manner of the court's working enchanters, the underrobe of fine linen, and over it the outer robe of the deep amber that your rank within the enchantment discipline carries, its hem embroidered with the notation of your specialization in the small script that the court uses for this purpose, the symbols precise enough that another enchanter reading them would know your training, your lineage within the discipline, and the primary branch of the work to which your practice is devoted. The robe is not ceremonial in the sense that it is reserved for occasions. It is worn for every working session, because the discipline begins with the body's preparation, and the body's preparation begins with the robe. And an enchanter who skips the preparation skips the first calibration of the day, which is themselves. You take the reference stone from the shelf beside the door, a smooth disc of the pale quartz that the court's instrument makers prepare specifically for enchanters working in the light disciplines, its surface ground to a precise flatness that allows it to show the quality of light falling on it without distortion, and carry it with you into the working chamber. The working chamber occupies the corner of the tower where two tall windows meet at right angles, the eastern and the southern, their frames aligned with the cardinal directions to within the tolerance the court considers acceptable for precision work, which is very small. The floor is the same pale limestone as the chamber walls, but dressed to a higher finish, its surface showing the faint geometry of the layout lines that the court's instrument makers inscribed when the room was prepared for enchantment work. Lines barely visible in ordinary light, but present to a trained eye the underlying structure of the space made explicit in the stone, so that instruments can be positioned correctly without measuring from scratch each time. The lens array stands at the room's center on its iron stand. 3 lenses of different curvatures mounted in their adjustable frames, their surfaces ground from the clear crystal that the court sources from the eastern ranges, where the geology produces material of sufficient clarity for precise optical work. The array has been in its stand since yesterday's session, where you left it at the position the calibration had reached by evening, the lenses angled to within a degree of their target alignment. Today's first task is to bring them to the final position, the precise configuration that will focus the dawn light into the working beam whose properties the commission requires. You set the reference stone on the receiving surface below the array and step back to observe the current state of the light through the chamber. The dawn light is entering the eastern window at the angle the season gives it, its rectangle laying itself across the floor, and the lower portions of the array stand in the warm gold that the reference stone is already reporting, its surface showing the light's quality in the way that quartz shows light, clearly and without the distortion that other materials introduce. You read the stone for a long moment, turning it in the light slowly, observing the way the illumination distributes across its surface, and comparing what you see to what the calibration records specify as the correct condition for beginning today's adjustment. The conditions are correct. You move to the array and begin. The lens array is adjusted through a system of fine-threaded iron screws mounted at the frame of each lens, each screw moving its lens through an arc so small that the motion is barely perceptible to the eye, but significant in its effect on the light passing through the array. You work with the adjustment tool, a small iron key whose head fits the screws precisely, and a patience that calibration work requires above all other qualities, because the effect of each adjustment takes a moment to settle into the light and reveal itself in the reference stone below, and hurrying the reading produces errors that compound through the subsequent adjustments and eventually require the whole sequence to be restarted from a known position. The first lens controls the initial gathering of the light, its curvature determining how much of the window's illumination the array receives and in what proportion across its aperture. You make a small adjustment to the upper screw, a half turn that changes the lens angle by less than the eye can perceive, and wait for the reference stone to show the effect. The stone's surface brightens fractionally on its right side, which tells you the adjustment has moved the lens in the correct direction, but by more than the target requires. And you counter with a quarter turn in the reverse direction and wait again, and the stone settles into an even illumination that matches the calibration record for this lens at this time of year. The second lens shapes the gathered light, compressing it toward the working beam's final form, and its adjustment is more sensitive than the first, because any error introduced here is magnified by the third lens rather than corrected. You work through it with the particular care that the sensitive middle stages of any calibration require, each adjustment smaller than the last, the screws moved by degrees that are closer to the thickness of the keys turning than to any measurable rotation, the light on the reference stone settling into its target condition through a series of incremental approaches rather than any single movement. This is not a process that can be hastened. The light will arrive at the correct configuration when the lenses are in the correct positions, and the lenses will reach the correct positions when each adjustment has been made correctly and given time to settle. And there is no shorter path between the current state and the desired one. The third lens is the final element of the array, and the most critical. Its surface ground to a tolerance that the court's instrument makers consider the limit of what current technique can achieve. Its curvature precise enough to show the qualities of light passing through it that coarser surfaces conceal. When this lens is correctly positioned, the working beam it produces will carry properties beyond simple illumination. The focused and structured light having a character that the enchantment discipline calls ordered, meaning that its waves are aligned in a way that ordinary diffuse light is not, and ordered light interacts with enchanted materials differently from disordered light, more predictably and more completely. The properties of the enchantment accessible to the working rather than partially obscured by the noise of unstructured illumination. You approach the third lens's adjustment with the full attention it requires. The reference stone positioned now at the precise point where the working beam will fall when the array is complete, and you begin the final sequence. The adjustments here are the smallest you will make all morning, each one so slight that the key barely moves in your hand, and the reference stone's response is correspondingly subtle, the changes in its surface appearing not as visible, shifts in brightness, but as alterations in the quality of the light, its texture becoming finer and more even as the lens approaches its target position. The grain of the illumination resolving toward the smooth consistency that ordered light produces. You make 7 adjustments to the third lens before the reference stone shows the condition the calibration record specifies, each one followed by the patient waiting that calibration demands, and the careful reading of the stone's response before the next is made. The 7th adjustment is the smallest of all, a movement so slight that you can feel it only in the resistance of the screw, rather than in any visible motion of the lens. And when you step back and read the reference stone in the settled light of the completed array, the surface shows the even, fine-grained illumination that ordered light produces, consistent across the full diameter of the stone without variation. The calibration is complete. The working beam is ready. You set the adjustment key on the instrument table and stand for a moment, simply observing the reference stone in the array's completed light. The morning's first task finished, and its result visible on the stone surface in the quality of the illumination it is receiving, which is correct and which is, in its own way, a form of beauty. Not the beauty of something ornate or dramatic, but the beauty of something that is precisely what it is intended to be. The commission material has been waiting on the preparation shelf since it arrived from the client 3 days ago, wrapped in the silk that the court requires for materials brought in for enchantment work, the wrapping protecting the surface from handling and from the ambient light of ordinary spaces that would begin to affect the material's receptive properties before the working had a chance to establish the intended effect. You unwrap it now with the care the silk requires, the fabric folded back in the sequence that ensures the material is not touched by ungloved hands at any point in the exposure. The object is a disk of the pale moonstone that the southern trade routes carry from the coastal quarries. Its surface polished to the smoothness that makes moonstone suitable for light-based enchantments. Its natural structure giving it the quality of holding light rather than merely reflecting it. The illumination absorbed into the stone's interior and released slowly, a property that the commission's specification intends to enhance through the working. The disc is approximately the width of 2 palms, its edges beveled to the angle the instrument makers prefer for this category of material, and its surface shows none of the internal faulting that makes some moonstone unusable for precise work. It is clear, and even throughout, the quality visible in the way the ambient light of the chamber distributes through it when you hold it at arm's length and look through it toward the eastern window. You place the disc on the receiving surface below the completed array, in the position where the working beam will fall on it, and observe the immediate effect of the ordered light on the material. The moonstone responds to the beam's first contact in the way that well-prepared stone of this quality responds, a slight brightening at its surface where the light is strongest, the illumination entering the material and beginning its distribution through the stone's interior structure. This is not yet the enchantment taking hold. The enchantment proper will not begin until the invocation is spoken and the working sequence engaged. But it is the material demonstrating its readiness for the working, showing that its structure is sound and its surface is prepared, and the conditions are correct to proceed. The invocation is not a performance and not a ceremony in the sense of something done for an audience or for appearance. It is a technical act, the precise vocalization of a sequence of tones and syllables that the enchantment discipline has developed over centuries of working with ordered light, each element of the sequence calibrated to interact with the light frequencies that the array is producing and with the receptive structure of the material below it. An enchanter who understands the invocation as anything other than a technical act is an enchanter who will make errors in its execution, because the attention required for precision is incompatible with the attention given to effect. You stand at the position the working requires, at the specified distance from the array, and at the angle to the beam that the invocation's first tones will engage most directly, and you speak the sequence from the beginning. The syllables are precise in their formation, each one requiring the mouth to find a position that produces the correct resonance in the chamber stone, and the chamber is part of the instrument in this sense, its dimensions and its materials having been chosen partly for their acoustic properties in relation to enchantment work. The sequence moves through its stages at the pace the working requires, neither faster nor slower, the tones sustaining for the duration the discipline specifies before giving way to the next. The moonstone responds to the invocation's progress in the way that the working is designed to produce, the light within its structure, shifting from the ambient distribution of the pre-invocation phase toward the patterned arrangement that the enchantment establishes, the illumination inside the stone beginning to organize itself along the lines that the working specifies. This is visible to a trained eye as a very subtle change in the stone's surface quality, a faint increase in the evenness of its internal light, the random distribution of the material's natural luminescence, being gradually replaced by something more structured and more consistent. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would be visible to a casual observer. Exactly what the working intends. The working proper begins after the invocation's final tone has settled into the chamber stone, and the silence that follows it has had the moment discipline requires for the established conditions to stabilize. You take the working stylus from the instrument table, a rod of the same pale quartz as the reference stone, but drawn to a point at one end. Its surface held to the same flatness standard as the reference stone, so that it does not introduce distortion into the light it touches. The stylus is an extension of the working, a means of directing the enchantment's progress through the material without touching it with the hand, which carries its own warmth and electrical quality that the precision of this working cannot accommodate. You bring the stylus to the first position, holding it steady above the moonstone surface at the height the working sequence specifies, and observe the material's response to its presence in the ordered beam. The light between the stylus and the stone surface shows a very slight density that is not visible under ordinary conditions. The working beam's ordered character, made briefly perceptible by the interaction of the quartz and the enchantment's established field, a quality more sensed than seen, present at the edge of perception rather than fully in it. Your teacher described this quality as the working becoming aware of the instrument, and you have found no better description in the years since. You move the stylus through the first sequence, the series of positions that the working's first stage requires, each one held for the count the discipline specifies before the motion to the next. The moonstone's internal light responds to each position shift, the pattern within the stone developing in increments that accumulate through the sequence into something measurably different from the stone's natural state, the enchantment taking hold in the material in the gradual and controlled way that precise work in ordered light achieves. There is no moment of sudden change, no visible effect that announces the working success. There is only the slow, patient accumulation of small, correct actions producing, through their accumulation, an outcome that none of them individually could achieve. The working concludes at the point the sequence specifies. The stylus returned to the instrument table, and the ordered beam allowed to rest on the moonstone for the settling period that the discipline requires before the material is assessed. You step back from the array and sit in the chair beside the southern window, the shuttered one, its cool, indirect light providing a neutral background for the waiting that the settling period demands. The settling is not idle time. It is part of the working, the final stage in which the enchantment resolves into its established form within the material structure, without further direction from the practitioner, the conditions having been set correctly enough that the completion occurs on its own terms. You wait with the quality of attention that the settling period requires, which is present but not active, observing without directing, available to note anything that the material shows during the settling but not intervening unless the material shows something that requires a response. It shows nothing that requires a response. The morning has been correctly prepared, the calibration complete, the invocation and working sequence executed without deviation. The moonstone settles in the ordered beam with the quiet consistency of a material receiving a working that has been given to it correctly. and the chamber is still around you, and the light from the eastern window lays its autumn rectangle across the floor, in the geometry it always lays at this hour, unchanged by the working that has occurred within it. When the settling period has elapsed, you rise and approach the moonstone with the assessment reference, a second disc of quartz larger than the first, held above the enchanted surface at the specified height, so that its own properties can be read in the interaction between its material and the working's established field. The assessment confirms what the careful preparation of the morning has made likely. The enchantment is established correctly, its pattern within the moonstone consistent with the commission's specification. The stone's internal light structured and even throughout, the quality that the client requires present in the material, in the form that the working was designed to produce. You wrap the moonstone in its silk, fold it in the correct sequence, and set it on the completion shelf, where it will rest until the client's representative comes to collect it. Then you attend to the chamber's closing, the array returned to its resting position, the reference stone and the working stylus wiped clean and returned to their cases. The invocation record completed in the working journal, with the morning's date and conditions and the assessment result, a precise and brief entry in the script that the discipline uses for records, every detail noted without elaboration, because the record exists for verification and not for narrative. When the chamber is in order, you stand at the eastern window for a moment, your hands resting on the stone of the sill, the autumn light warm on your face, and the court's towers visible through the glass, their pale limestone catching the late morning sun in the way that pale stone catches it, steadily and without drama. The working is complete. The commission is fulfilled. The light is what it has always been, and the morning has moved through its sequence of correct preparations and correct actions, and arrived at its correct conclusion, which is the only conclusion the discipline recognizes as meaningful. Still, warm, complete,